What do you think? Is this attempt and failure to return home and recognition of the changes in the individual a valid and interesting part of the quest? Or would you rather the story ends happily ever after, immediately after the action or drama element is resolved? Does it matter how Bilbo and Frodo returned to the Shire? How Alice got on after Wonderland? How Harry Potter dealt with the Muggle world after Hogwarts?
On Stories of Self, we go on journeys into the lives of ourselves and others. We see how stories connect, how they diverge, and how we can create our worlds and solve our problems. This is the real-life remix of storytelling, which is so often stranger than fiction. So come and sit around the fire, chill by the ocean, or get a coffee with me, as I delve into the stories of self that make, break, and remake us. Some stories are dramatic, some are serene, some will magically mirror you, and some will be delightfully different. I'm your host, Katie Reeve Arnold, and this is Stories of Self.
I've recently got back from a trip away, and it got me thinking about the feeling of going away and the feeling of coming home. Often we look forward to going away. We plan trips and we get excited, thinking about all the things we'll do and appreciating that so much will be different for us wherever we are going in comparison to our day-to-day lives at home. Wherever and whatever home is to each of us, when we leave it, we know things will be different wherever we go. Throughout my life so far, I've really enjoyed trips away, be it overnights, long weekends, a week or two, a month or two, or even a year or more. I knew things would be different away from home. But what I didn't appreciate when I started to go away was the fact that while I was away, home was changing too, and changing in a couple of different ways. First, it wasn't frozen there waiting for me. It was still in process. This might sound almost mad or hella narcissistic, but to me, home waited unchanging behind me for me to return. But no, of course not. Okay, of course not. But even when I cognitively knew it, in my thinking mind, it still wasn't part of my deeper emotional acceptance for a long time. Changes were striking whenever I returned, and I felt somewhat affronted by them. Overlooking the fact that there had been a reason I had been called to leave, the place I had called home was never perfect to begin with. It was just what I was used to, and in that it was comfortable. And perhaps that's where the affronted feeling came from. In changing the place that was comfortable had altered its comfort level, requiring my reassessment to see whether this altered form would be better or worse. It posed me with a challenge I not only hadn't expected, but had taken for granted would not occur. So, for better or worse, sometimes I returned to an irreversibly changed home. So it wasn't really a homecoming. Instead, it was a thwarted attempt to return to a place that no longer really existed, and a head start in re-establishing myself in somewhere admittedly similar, but not quite the same, because home as I knew it had ceased to exist in quite that way while I had been gone. This could be quite disconcerting, but it was in most ways beyond my control. Mostly these changes were things that would have happened whether I had left or not. They were outside of my influence, because otherwise I would have recognized them already as part of the process of deciding to go away, and they wouldn't have been a surprise to me. I would have been prepared. In the fact that they were outside of my control, I found a path to acclimatize to the new version of my home that I returned to. It didn't make it easy always, but it meant I was in radical acceptance most of the time. I wasn't trying to change it, but rather being with it as it was. And in that, I was already further forwards in processing the changes and moving past them. But the few times that I refused to accept it were the toughest. Not accepting something that is, and that had changed, and that is as it is like a combination of pulling your face roughly against a concrete wall while denying the wall is there. It just keeps hurting until your approach changes, not the wall. And also, it is like wearing what to you seem rose-tinted spectacles, but are actually blackout shades across your eyes. You are no longer moving in a true world, so everything becomes harder to manage. Any movement is difficult, and geez, don't go getting behind the wheel of a car or bus and trying to move large things or others around, because you have lost sight and connection with what is real. So you are just busy steering yourself, and potentially everyone else, the wrong way. In that way, I'd say taking some time for yourself when you find things have changed beyond your control is really important and useful. Reinforce your safety with some things that haven't changed, and reconnect with those things that are now different gradually and repeatedly. Repattern your impression of your home environment by gently rewiring your nervous system in a way that doesn't try to deny reality, but accepts it and builds from it. And then there is the more expected or predicted aspect to deal with, of the you that left not quite being able to ever return home. This is the last phase of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, depicted in his book The Hero with 1,000 Faces, where he reflects on the universality of the human journey that we are all on and the storytelling of it. The outcome that is glazed over in some tales but focused on in others is the fact that going away from home, for whatever reason, changes you. So the you that returns is not the exact same you that left. Hence it can feel like you cannot quite bed back in and return home like you thought, as the very you that you are is different. In this, we experience the same things we remember from home differently. Our own perspective has changed, even if home hasn't. This can be true of any trip. Going out into the world changes who we are. It adds new information that we incorporate into our very being. In this way, you don't actually even come home from school or work or the shops as quite the same person who left, let alone come home from a long trip, time working away, or war. It can be very difficult then to marry the difference between being the person you were when you left and being the person you are now as you return. And the fact that people back home are expecting the same you to return who left can add pressure to reject the you have become, or mask changes under a veneer as you play the role of the old you. In this way, being true to yourself as you live and tell the story of who you are can be challenging. Being the most up-to-date version of you is constantly challenged by those around us who knew us as we were before. Just as we can feel surprised that home and others change, they too can be surprised that we do. It is a life's work to allow the dance of change in yourself and others, stepping forwards and back, recognizing that nothing stays the same, and even things that continue change as they do so. I remember times before I felt able to understand or accept the changes in me, and I remember how difficult it felt to return home. Yes, I wanted to see all the people I loved, and I was excited to be back, but I was also returning home with something of me fundamentally changed. Big things, small things, all the in-between things. I was, as I saw it then, returning home changed beyond repair, torn between grief for the person that I had left as, who I would never be again, and the person I was when I was away, who seemed freer in that tide of change to embrace the joy of being and exploring the new, and a tentative love and desire to be the person I had become, albeit tempered with fear that the version 2.0 of me would not be accepted. I've often sat longer than needed in airports, train stations, cafes, elongating my journey home, not wanting to leave the journey phase because I wasn't returning as the same person as the one who had left, and not only did I no longer know how to play that version of me that I had left behind, more and more I didn't want to. I remember one specific time, coming home from a long trip with friends, all our families and partners messaging, eagerly waiting to see us, and us all deliberately missing our first available buses and trains, huddled in the cold airport arrivals around one last group coffee as we looked around, none of us sure why we didn't want to leave, but all of us knowing that it was easier to be who we had become during this trip with each other, because we had been on the journey of change together. Torn between being desperate to go home and knowing we couldn't quite, because the me we each were bringing home was different. This process can be a little bit scary, and I think a lot of us have felt it to some degree. The capacity to embrace unexpected change in our stories, in ourselves, others, and in the homes we return to is an almost universal sticking point at some time in all our lives, with us often clinging to the past versions or trying to control or manipulate the world around us at great energetic expense to ourselves. And it can be massively liberating to overcome this by realizing that we, others, and home are changing all the time, and to let go of even trying to remain static in trust that we can be safe in change. What do you think? Is this attempt and failure to return home and recognition of the changes in the individual a valid and interesting part of the quest? Or would you rather the story ends happily ever after, immediately after the action or drama element is resolved? Does it matter how Bilbo and Frodo returned to the Shire? How Alice got on after Wonderland? How Harry Potter dealt with the Muggle world after Hogwarts? Because it happens to all of us to some extent. We can be changed by any amount of time outside the security of our nest, our place of safety, our refuge. We can, and one could argue should, be changed by our interactions with the outside world. Both big and small trips can inspire huge personal shifts, or nuanced, deep changes, or superficial but lasting alterations in us that not only impact us but everyone we return to. I am very aware at this stage that my returns can be shifting for the people I return to as well. When I come back changed, I challenge all I return to. Not usually deliberately, although more and more I do actually enjoy playing the changeling, the embodiment of the shift between worlds of past and future. I enjoy dancing in the present, knowing fully that on one hand it is eternal. We only have the present moment, and it is made of everything before and will make everything after. But on the other hand, it is ephemeral, ethereal, short-lived and delicate. I often mix those two words up, ephemeral and ethereal. Thanks to a massive impact to my head in my late 20s, some words are now interchangeable. But I enjoy noticing why when that issue comes up. Always there is something about the words I confuse that links them for me. Hence I batch them, and they go together somehow. And the present is, to me, both durable and eternal, and short-lived and delicate. It is all we have, and we are always in it, yet it is gone before we can fully recognize really it is there. So I enjoy being the herald, the cheerleader, the faithful servant of the very change that once confused me so. And at the same time, I appreciate that, in that, I can be unsettling for others. Perhaps that's my role. One of them anyway. Well, for now at least. It will all change in the future. That is the one thing we can be sure of after all. So many things have changed so drastically, spectacularly and spontaneously in me. And perhaps my joy in what I have become and am becoming can serve to flag the fact that yes, it can be unsettling, and yes, there can be grieving and saying goodbye unexpectedly to who you were in ways you would not have thought or known you would choose to. But you can't look forward with hindsight. So there is peace in the trust that one day, when you look back, it will all be the right thing. In order to try to embrace change more easily, with less pain, struggle, and resistance, I've been trying to cultivate a nostalgia for the present. Do you feel what I'm saying? When we look back with nostalgia, the thing we look at has a rosy glow, a recognition of its value to us and the joy it gave us at a certain time. I try to find my way into that in the present a little bit, to notice that the me I love being now will change, that the home I love living in now will change, that all surrounding me will change, and to let it all glow a little with this reflected energy as it basks in my love of it. Sent and given all the more strongly from me for recognizing the limitations of time and the certainty of change. Perhaps it isn't about questioning and wanting to know and control whether it gets better or worse. Perhaps it is just about breathing in that eternal, ephemeral, ethereal present moment that passes through us like mist as we share it. Give it 10 seconds, or more if you can, at some point in your day, every day, to breathe out fully, then breathe in slowly, and breathe out even more slowly, at least once, and to notice where you are, and notice it in the light that as you notice it, it is already changing. And that is okay. That is life. That is why our favourite stories all involve something happening. To change is to live. That is the point.
We are all telling our stories. And we are all telling ourselves stories about it all. Are you brave enough to walk with me into hearing, considering and understanding the stories we tell? Join me next time, where we'll be considering more stories and illusions and stepping into creating the freedom we desire. Every moment, we are who we are choosing to be. You choose. Choose you. Because your story matters.